I'd like to introduce Nick Griffin, chairman of the British National Party, member of the European Parliament. That's why we're all here. So, Nick Griffin, thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, we're here, as you know, as an early part of the election campaign for next May. It is a really important election to this party. They've written us off. We're bouncing back, but we are the underdogs. It's really going to take some doing to win this, but we put together a tremendous campaign. I'm not going to tell the TV about it because then it'll be seen by the opposition and so on, but there's a fantastic campaign. It's going to be much more effective than last time, and we're not in it because we just have to be. We are in it to win next May. And I can tell you that we are going to be fighting on absolute bread and butter issues for this party and for our voters. We're not going to be messing around with all sorts of side issues. We're going to be concentrating on the things that matter to our voters. So the most important thing is immigration. And we are going to be talking about immigration because if we hadn't talked about it 10 years ago, none of the other buggers who now yap about what they're going to do would even talk about it because they'd ignored the British people for 30 years over that subject. They'd still be ignoring it if we hadn't forced them to talk about it. They're not going to do anything about it, but at least they're talking about it. And we're going to carry on talking about it. And because they are now, we're going to talk about it in tougher, blunter, more straightforward terms than before because we've shifted the debate in our direction and we've got the debate going and we're going to keep that going. It's going to be particularly important next year because I tell you that if people are already angry about immigration and how the ruling elite have betrayed us and given away our country, if they're already angry about it, you wait till next year when these Bulgarian and Romanian gypsies start coming in, because I've seen those people already. I don't know if you've had the pleasure of their company yet in Blackpool, but I've seen them in Paris, I've seen them a lot in Brussels, I've seen them in Strasbourg, and no one in this country has seen anything like them. You know, we know we've got a problem with that big punk Muslim community who groom our girls, but if you think about it in human terms, they at least leave their own alone. Doesn't help us, but they leave their own girls alone. They nonce our girls. The Roma do it to their own daughters. These people are the scum of the earth, and our political elite is going to let them into our country. Cameron's saying, oh, we're going to see if we can keep them out. No, he can't. We're in the European Union. They control our borders. There's absolutely nothing the political elite can do to keep these people out. And they're going to come here because, let's face it, we pay taxes. We're soft-touch Britain. So people are going to be incandescent with rage about immigration come next May. And we're going to be talking about it. We're going to be pointing out, yes, UKIP talk about it, but their immigration is what they call balanced. Just keep the population the same. So when 350 million Brits leave, 350,000 Brits leave each year, that means they'd let in 350,000 non-whites, plus another 50,000 as long as they've got work permits, which is typical for a party basically funded by the City of London, run by merchant bankers, because they think it's good that a foreigner comes in with a work permit. I don't, because that means they've got a right to take one of our people's jobs, and that is not fair. Our people should have our jobs. That's going to be our message next May. We're going to be talking about the European Union. We're going to be saying, very bluntly actually, because all the others are going to be saying, well, vote for us, we're going to give you a referendum soon. Well, we've campaigned for a referendum actually, as you know, but next year we're not going to be campaigning for a referendum because I'll tell you what will happen if we get a referendum. It will be rigged. The question will be rigged and every single house will get a brochure paid for by the state giving the case for staying in and a brochure for the case to get out, and they'll be the same size and that'll be really fair, except for the fact that everyone will also get a brochure from the government, and the government's brochure will also say stay in, and they'll be saying to people, they'll be pointing to various companies in this country, especially say the big car plants, Nissan and people like that, Honda. And they'll be saying, the bosses of them will be saying, if Britain leaves the European Union, we'll close our factories and move to Hungary. And they will terrify the British people. And when you consider that a third of our people, I read a survey recently, a third of British families, the survey said, have just £10 a month left, £10 left at the end of the month. 10 quid disposable income once they paid all their bills. They're just keeping their head above water by £10 a month. And I'll tell you what, there's another third who don't have anything left at the end of the month, who every single month are more and more and more in debt. So that's 2/3 of our people at least in absolute dire financial straits. And when these crooks start saying, and big business start saying, and the banks start saying, if we leave the European Union, you'll lose your jobs, people will be terrified by that, and in the end they'll reluctantly vote yes, because the whole thing will be a fraud. They won't give us a referendum until they know that we're going to give them the right result. But once we've had a referendum and we give them the right result for them, they'll then say, case closed, you're never going to have a referendum again, you've given your consent, therefore that's it. Because you saw it in France, you saw it in Germany. If a country gives the wrong answer, no, we want to stay free. No, we don't want to be part of your sick bankers club. If a country gives the wrong answer, they make them have another referendum and another one until they give them the right answer. And then once they give them the right answer, the book is closed, never again. And that's what they do again. It's what they're going to do in Britain in 2017. So our message will be, vote British National Party, and we will not give you a referendum. We'll simply take the Treaty of Rome, the Treaty of Maastricht, and we will tear them up, and we will be independent the following day. That's our message. So, we're going to have a great campaign on those bread and butter issues. And I can tell you that for most of the country, we've already got the deposits, £5,000 a throw. We've got most of those raised in virtually every super constituency in the country. Several places have already got the money for a full wave of leaflets, but the money's still coming in. We need a lot of money. We will be standing everywhere. We will get the TV broadcast. It will be the best one we've ever done. In fact, there's a possibility we'll get 2. We'll see. Because we got a big vote last time, as you know. We got a big vote, so we might get 2. But it's going to be a cracking campaign. As for the leaflets, well, Blackpool's really done its bit, and more. Because every single parliamentary constituency to get a basic leaflet would need 300 quid. It's not that much, but when you roll it out by hundreds of them, it's an awful lot of money. So that £2,000 that Blackpool's raised, if you think of it in constituency terms, that's nearly 7 parliamentary constituencies already covered with leaflets. That's a tremendous achievement by you people, by Brian especially as the organiser. It's really, really quite something. Round of applause for all of you. Really good. And of course Dave, because it's the treasurer who controls these things. It's the fund holder who makes it work, who keeps it together. Absolutely brilliant. Really, really wonderful. And whatever happens in that election, we are going to give the British people a choice. A really serious choice. And that's what democracy is all about. With the others, as you know, you couldn't put a cigarette paper between their policies on subject after subject after subject. And at the very least, we give people a choice. And like I say, we're fighting to win it. I hope we win it. I believe we can win it. But if we don't worry. I'm going to be spending more time back in Britain, back campaigning with the British National Party, because me and this party, we're not giving up whatever happens. But I can tell you, I do want that second term. I do want to get back there. Because the first year I was like all MEPs, you're the new boy when you're 11 in this great big school, and you haven't the faintest idea where you are, what you're supposed to be doing, what you're allowed to do, what they're allowed to do to you. Frankly, it's terrifying and bewildering. And it takes a year to get sorted out and really to work out what's going on. Now, this next year, there's going to be nationalists from several other countries coming in, and they'll also be, confused and lost and not know the ropes. And I want to be there to help them so that they get up to speed, because we need a nationalist bloc working in that place to take a big rusty bloody spanner and shove it in the works. That's the job of us nationalists, right? So I want to help us nationalists. So I know the ropes. I've got the contacts Now, for the first year, as I say, I didn't know what I was doing. No one does. For the next 3 years even, for the next 2 years certainly, I was fighting just to keep this party alive, just to survive, because we were under such waves of attacks. You know the case, how Blackpool was held together there with Brian and the others. But still, everything dipped down. We were taken right down into the depths of depression. They almost broke us. So for 2 years, I was just dealing with that. It's only really the last year that I've really been able to get into the swing of things and start making contacts and developing those contacts and doing things worthwhile with them. Like that. I wouldn't have got to Syria if I hadn't been an MEP, because I got there first in June, and because I was an MEP, I had an impact there. And we even made the BBC change their propaganda. So then that gave me the chance to go back when they were threatened with a media and terrible war by that bastard Cameron, who was prepared to spend £250 million in 12 hours flattening Syria into the hands of Al-Qaeda, into the hands of exactly the same kind of swine who murdered Lee Rigby on our streets. Because those are the people who would have benefited from Britain spending £250 million in 12 hours with a mass criminal bombing attack on the people of Syria who were simply fighting to get back control of their own country from gangs of thousands of Islamist fanatics who've invaded them from the rest of the world. That's the reality of what's happening there. And that 250 million, it's a lot of money, you know. They're imposing the bedroom tax on the poorer people of Britain. They're driving thousands upon thousands of families to absolute despair with that vicious tax. People, for instance, like a mum and a dad have split up. So they've now got 2 houses. And they've got the kids who go from one place to another, naturally enough. But each of them is having to pay bedroom tax because they're saying, well, that's a spare bedroom. No, it's not. It's their kid's bedroom. It's their kid's home. But it's a spare bedroom if you're a rich Tory. And if you're trying to make screw money out of the British people in order to pay for the bankers' crisis. And that whole bedroom tax, they estimate that over a year, that's going to gouge out of some of the poorest people in Britain, some of the poorest families in Britain, it's going to gouge 500 million. And Cameron was prepared to blow that, quite literally, half of that in 12 hours, and the whole lot probably in 48 hours. Gone. So they'd screw thousands of our people down into the dust in order to get the money for a 48-hour war. That is criminal. That's disgusting. And I'm very, very proud to have been able to do something to stop it. And I'm really grateful to those of you who were here last time who campaigned so hard to put me in that position. Thank you very much. And of course, that wasn't just about the money, the importance of keeping us out of that war. And if you don't know the story of exactly how it happened, then get the leaflet, get the paper and read up on it after the meeting tomorrow and then tell people about it. I won't go into it tonight because most people know, and certainly most of the viewers on BNP TV know. But it's not just about the money, because if Britain's cruise missiles had been used to destroy the present government of Syria and to hand it over to the Islamist fanatics, then instead of the chemical weapons, which Syria had as a defensive deterrent capability, they were never going to use those unless Israel used their enormous range of nuclear missiles against Syria. They were never going to use those chemical weapons. They had them in case someone attacked them, just the same as Britain has a nuclear deterrent. No British government, not even the most wicked one, has ever, I don't think, thought about using the nuclear deterrent as an aggressive attack on somebody else. It's there to deter other people from attacking us. That's why Syria had chemical weapons. But if the British government, in their stupidity and corruption and treachery, had used our money to overthrow the Syrian government, all those chemical weapon stocks, 1,000 tons of deadly chemical gases and nerve agents, would have fallen into the hands of exactly the same people as murdered Lee Rigby. And instead of being worried about what they're doing in Syria, we'd have been worrying about what they were doing in the Trafford Centre, as a for instance. That would have been the great concern. And as a result of that, the limited war of 48 hours bombing wouldn't have been a limited war, because the rebels would have started to take over, and the British government would then have said, oh dear, we can't have this, because these fanatic Islamists are going to get chemical weapons. We'll have to go and take them off them. And British soldiers would right now, this Christmas, be fighting and dying in Syria in order to stop the rebels getting their hands on the chemical weapons, which have been, in fact, until Britain interfered, would have been in the hands of the rebels' enemies, the government of Syria. So there'd be families, young families, right now, getting letters or the knock on the door from the MOD saying that their dad or their boy or their sister had been killed in yet another war that's got nothing damn well to do with us, in Syria this time. And together, we were able to help stop that. Not exclusively. President Putin of Russia was the man who really stopped it. But my letter and what I did with the Syrians bought him the time to stop it. And time is really important when you're up against something like that. So it's a real tremendous achievement. And I say it's not just about the money. It's kept Britain out of another lousy war. And it's stopped more of our boys and girls coming home in coffins from wars that have nothing to do with us. And keeping Britain out of foreign wars that have nothing to do with us is one of the main purposes of this party as a nationalist party. And as you know, we've actually done it. Job done, mission accomplished. Being an MEP got me recently over to Russia. And you might think, well, does Russia really matter in the northwest of England? Well, we're not going to be talking about it come the European elections, because it doesn't matter to most ordinary people. But it should matter to nationalists. It should matter to people who've cared enough to come here this evening to take part, to donate, to help, and to come along to listen. I'll briefly explain why it matters. First of all, like I said, there wouldn't be relative peace in Syria now, relative peace, because they've still turned into a hellhole, these Islamist lunatics. But there wouldn't be relative peace in Syria. It would be a flattened disaster area if it wasn't for Russia, and we would have been dragged into something looking suspiciously like the start of a Third World War. That's where that was going. And in the end, it was Russia stopped that. Because not so many years ago, Russia was in the hands of a greedy, liberal, looter elite, just like our country is, just like the whole of Western Europe is. And Putin and the Russians have got it out of those hands, and you've got a country there, the one great country in the white world, which is now run, if not by nationalists, at least by patriots. And at least by people who understand the job of a government is to run their country for the benefit of their people. That's the core, and that's understood. And that means keeping it out of foreign wars. And it means having a country that's strong and proud and looked after itself. And that's what now is the position in Russia. So Russia matters because it's now helping to keep the peace. Not just Syria. If we'd ended up in Syria, we would now also be about to go into war against Iran. More British boys coming home in body bags from a conflict that has nothing to do with us. And Russia's helped to keep the peace there and to broker a deal. So this world, our world, looks a damn sight safer now than it did 6 months ago, primarily because of Russia. And that is something, therefore, it matters. Russia matters also for us as nationalists because the media there is relatively free and it's relatively honest. It's nothing like the controlled media in Britain. I'm sure you know how much the BBC lie. You must do. You must have a fair inkling of an idea. How many people, have a show of hands, how many people here watch RT, Russia Today? Fair few. Well, the rest should do as well, because it's the only mainstream news programme in the English language which pretty often tells the truth. It tells the truth about the financial crisis, about the swindlers running our government, about how they loot and rob the country, about how the United States is falling apart, and about the terrible problems facing the world economy, thanks to the banksters and the politicians they bought. It tells the truth. It's a really good programme. It's the only one worth watching. Stop watching BBC for news and watch RT instead. And it's having an effect throughout Britain. In fact, everywhere in the English-speaking world, so many people are now getting the truth. It was about a third of this audience. But each of you speak to lots of people. So it means that the old lies 5-10 years ago, the BBC could con 95% of the British people 95% of the time. Not anymore, because enough people actually watch the truth on RT that word goes round, word of mouth and through the internet. And so they can no longer lie us into wars in the same way. They can no longer cover up the shocking corruption of their system because there's a major country running a major English language news station and it's brought a degree of truth back into the world's media. That's something that's really important. When I was over there the other day, I was on People's Radio, which is a radio station across the whole of Russia. That's 9 time zones. It's a vast vast place. Millions and millions of listeners, all of them nationalists, traditionalists, and proper real Christians, all of them. So it's pumping out our kind of message all the time. They gave me an hour on that. I was speaking to Derek earlier on that in a few months' time they are going to have a People's Radio. And, well, I can get on it. Doesn't help us there because that's about Russia. But they're really keen on showing some of the stories from BNP TV. I was telling them about the interview that I did with Karen, for instance, on that bench. And they were so shocked and so stunned by just how bad the situation is in Britain that they said, yeah, we'd like to run that, we translate it and so on, because it's important that our people find out about it. And it is really important that Russians find out about it, because here's the final deal. I'm sure you all look around this country and you think, my God, how much longer have we got? You must all have thought of that. Not necessarily in Blackpool, but when you look at Preston and Burnley and Blackburn and further afield at Birmingham and Bradford and London, and you think, well, how much longer have we got? And it's not that many years. And if we don't win, Russia will be the last bastion of our people, of our kind. They're a European people, they're a Christian people. Let's use the BBC term, they're a white people. And they're proud of it, and they're like us. They're not exactly like us, but they're very, very like us. And while Russia is still there as a free, independent country, our people have a future wherever we are in the world, because there's a great superpower, basically in the end, on our side and like us. And that's something that's really important. So that's why the little things we can do to stand by Russia and to undermine the attacks on Russia by the same people who destroyed this country, we do what we can do, and Russia matters. It really does. Because we're in a race against time, and as you know, the race is rigged against us. When you've got a media where every person in it is a member, almost without exception, of the National Union of Journalists, and if you're in the National Union of Journalists, you're not allowed to report on the British National Party in a fair, objective way. You can only report on us if it does us down. Well, that straight away is a huge bias. Millions of people out there think we're in a democracy, and yet they're having their information absolutely filtered by a gang of Marxist crooks so that they don't see what's really going on. We're in a race against time. We can win this race still. We can win it through the ballot box. There's no doubt about it. We can do. I'll tell you why in a little while. But even if we win through the ballot box, we've got problems. Several of my colleagues are in the European Parliament and members of the Vlaams Belang. It used to be called the Vlaams Blok. It was the most popular party in Belgium. The most popular party, but it was banned because the Liberals said it was a threat to democracy. Let me run that past you again. The most popular party in Belgium was banned because it was a threat to democracy by the Liberal elite. That's not in some third world banana republic. That's in the perfectly civilised European country of Belgium. And you'll have seen, I'm sure, what's happened in Greece recently, where Golden Dawn, the Nationalist Party, have come from a tiny percentage over the last few years to enormous amounts of support. And so the powers that be there have turned on them, and they're trying to destroy that party, despite the fact it's now backed by 20% of all Greeks. 20% of Greeks support that party now. The liberal elite over there on the left are trying to destroy it. And part of the reason for my conference in Russia, or the main thing really, was to protest about and draw attention to this appalling attack on nationalism, because it's not an attack on the Greek party, it's an attack on the Greek people. And it's not just an attack on the Greek people, it's an attack on us. Because the liberal left elite all over Europe are saying, oh, it's tremendous, this is really good, that these dangerous extremists are being stamped on in Greece. What they're saying is, look, people, if you ever dare do it in your country, we'll stamp on you as well. So it's an attack on us. It's an attack on our rights. So therefore, I felt it was really important, and others did as well, to do something to draw attention to it. And because in Russia, Russia always is being lectured and lectured and lectured by the likes of Cameron and Miliband and all the rest of them, and the people who run the BBC and the Guardianistas. They're always lecturing Russia on how Russia is not a free place, not a fair place, not democratic. So the Russians were very, very pleased to have people coming over and say, wait a minute, we'll tell you what it's really like over in the West. So we talked about what's happened with Golden Dawn. Some of what I was speaking about was about another attack on human rights in Britain, which a huge number of my constituents, relatively, have come up and talked to me about and contacted my office about, and that's the social services snatching children. There's a terrifying number of ordinary, decent families have been torn apart in this country in the last few years by having their kids snatched. Now, if people are beating their kids with iron bars and so on, of course they've got to be taken into care. But the British care system is riddled with bullying, drugs and paedophilia, and it's not in the interest of any child, unless the situation at home is really desperate, to be taken into and put into the care system. They lose 10,000 kids a year in the care system. They go into it and all trace is lost to them. What happens to them? Nobody knows. Nobody can know because by definition they're lost. You don't know where they've gone. It's an appalling system, and you've now got social workers who've got a quota of how many kids they've got to take into care, how many kids they've got to kidnap. So it isn't about looking after the kids, it's about meeting the quotas, and if they meet the quotas they get financial bonuses for doing so. That's how corrupt and how wicked it is. And they concentrate on white families, because if they did it to the Muslims, if they did it to the blacks, they'd be hell to pay. They concentrate on white families, and they concentrate on white working class families, because they do it to middle class families. They've got the money, the connections, they can speak to a lawyer and all the rest of it. And then within that, it's not just any old family. They concentrate on families who, when the social workers come and start poking their noses in it, it's the families who roll over and play dead, they leave alone. But the families who say, look, these are my kids, this is my home, get out. They're the ones they go for, because they're trying to take the rebelliousness out of the British people, and they believe that they take the rebellious kids off the rebellious parents before they even become rebellious kids, put them with a nice middle class family, or put them into a care home so they end up as prostitutes. Whatever it is, they won't be rebels in the next generation. It's a social engineering system designed to break the white working class of this country so that people are happier to be exploited or more willing to put up with it. And they're breaking up loving families left, right and centre. And the final, most scary thing is time and time again, when you talk to people about this, when you look at the pictures of the kids involved, they take the good-looking kids. They take the pretty little girls. They take the nice-looking little boys. And that's because, I believe, the ruling elite of this country, one of its currencies is young children, because we are run by a paedophile criminal elite. The simple fact. And some of what I was telling them in Russia, I think they almost didn't believe it. But I've spoken to people in tears over how they've had their lives ruined by these social workers and these crazed judges. Front page of the Mail today. Finally, a top family judge orders social workers who insisted a mother must have a caesarean explain why you snatch baby girl at birth. And this was an Italian woman who came over here on a course for 2 weeks, and she ended up going home 3 months later having been forcibly chained down to a bed, sedated, and then forced to have a caesarean when she was heavily pregnant, and the child taken away from her at birth, and now put into the care system. Despite the fact they now say this mother's temporary health problem is over, they say, no, the child's going into the care system. What an absolute disgrace. And okay, it's good, at least one family judge has said this, explain why, please. But another family judge not that long ago said, yeah, that's okay. Take a perfectly competent, loving mother and take her child, because she had 2 other kids. She was only over here for 2 weeks and the kids were looked after back home. Take the child off her at birth. Bang. Absolutely shocking. It really is. But it's the kind of thing happening in Britain. It's the kind of thing, because there's only one Lib Dem MP, John Hemmings. To be fair to him, he talks about this. None of the others do. There's only Christopher Booker in the Daily Telegraph. No one else anywhere in the British elite even talks about this subject. We talk about it as far as possible, and I do what I can to help, because it's our job, because it's our kind of people are being victimised in this way by them, by representatives of the system. Coming back to the position with Golden Dawn, just briefly, because you might have seen it on television, and yeah, they look pretty hard, don't they? You know, all the black shirts and all the rest of it. It's not how we do politics, but it's how the Greeks do politics, and they're entitled to do it their way. It's not for anyone else to interfere. So they were doing very nicely. They've gone from 0.7% of the vote just a few years ago, less than 1% of the vote, to 6%, 7%, 14%, 20% in the opinion polls. And then there was an incident where a leftist, an anarchist, was stabbed to death, which shouldn't happen to anybody, but his name was Killer P. The clue is in the name, Killer. That's what he called himself. Happily shown, masked up, ready to go out and attack nationalists, which he'd done for clearly a long, long time. And he was actually, it wasn't an attack organised by the leadership of Golden Dawn, clearly not. It happened at a football match. There were 150 football fans fighting each other, one club being basically nationalist, the other club being basically communist. And this bloke was part of a gang who attacked a smaller number of nationalists, and he attacked one man against five. 5 red anarchists against 1 nationalist, who drew a knife in self-defence and stabbed one of them. So he shouldn't have done, he's got to be punished. But what the hell's that got to do with the party? Absolutely nothing, but it's an excuse to try to destroy that party. Now, the other day, just the other day in Greece, there's an anarchist up in court for murdering a taxi driver, a family man, in the course of a robbery. And he carried out this robbery to get funds for his far-left organisation. And it turns out he's a Facebook follower of various members of the socialist government. And he praised the socialist government. So they'll try and break Golden Dawn over the fact that a football fan who happens to say he supports Golden Dawn kills someone in a street fight. But when a hardcore anarchist leftist goes out and robs banks and he's like this with a ruling socialist elite, oh, that's different. That's absolutely different. This shows how much pressure nationalists come under from this corrupt ruling elite. It doesn't matter whether it's conservative, Lib Demish, Labour, socialist, ultra-capitalist, ultra-communist, we're their enemy. In the end, they all come together, however much they disagree about how to share the spoils up, about who's got to get their nose in the trough first, however much they disagree about those things, when they're up against nationalists, they all come together and they all unite. And that's what the opposition have done, the opposition to us have done in Greece. They've all come together and united against the nationalists. The only way that we can stand up to that as nationalists is if we all come together and stand together. So an attack on any nationalist is an attack on all of us, whether it's in this country or whether it's abroad. And we need to stand together as nationalists. So that's why I took time out from my work here for my constituents and for the party here to look at the bigger picture, because sometimes the bigger picture really matters. Because what the Greeks are fighting, the reason that so many of them now support Golden Dawn, it's exactly the same as we're fighting. It's just that Greece is a little bit further down the road. Here in this country, the ruling elite, the Labour Party, the Tories started it under Thatcher, Blair carried it on, and now this bunch are doing the same thing. They're selling England, selling Britain off piecemeal. Every hospital, every school, every playing field, everything they are selling off. Gas, water, electricity, post office. One thing after another, they sell it off. The post office sale recently was a classic case where the shares went up, what was it, about 3 times the following day. So most of those shares went to their big institutional friends and they're worth 3 times what they paid for them the next day. That is not business. That's not saving the taxpayer money. That is robbing the people of this country blind. And it's got to stop. And we're the only people who say, seriously, it's got to stop. Some of the others, the Labour Party, come an election, they'll say, oh, we think this should be stopped. Occasionally a bold Labour Party politician says, and we should renationalise British Rail or the post office or the electricity companies and so on. But when they say renationalise it, they mean go to the crooks who now own those things, having stolen them from us going for a song, and pay them the full current value so that we can get it back. What the hell's the point of that? If you've had something stolen from you, you have an absolute right, and the authorities have an absolute duty to get it back for you and not pay for it. It was stolen, you give it back, and you're going to prison. That should be the message for the ruling elite. And the way that Greece is being nailed to the floor by the banksters. They'll do it to this country as well, you know, in the not too distant future, because when you count all the private finance agreements, all the various fiddles that have been used to disguise the scale of this country's debt, when you count also the public and the private debt together, this country owes 10 times as much as it produces every year. We're far, far worse. The Italian figure is about 120%. We're 9 times worse than Italy. This country is an economic basket case. It's a disaster waiting to happen. And as it happens, you've already seen it, the banks will be the ones going down, but us, the ordinary people, will be the ones forced to pay to bail them out. And whether you're a taxpayer, you'll be forced to bail them out, or whether you're in receipt of benefits, you'll be forced to bail them out by cuts. One way or another, every single ordinary person in this country is going to pay for the bankers' crisis. And there's a huge crisis coming our way. But at present, it's struck Greece. So it's important to us to see what's happening, but it's also important to us that Greece be taken over by a nationalist party who can put it right. Because I like the Greeks. I've met a number of them. They're really nice people. But if their economy is being destroyed, lots of them will come to Britain to work. And we haven't got the jobs. We haven't got the houses. It's the same as the Poles. I like the Poles. They're tremendous people. The Polish nationalist is a real nationalist movement. It's an inspiration to us. But we don't want Poles coming here by the 100,000, taking our jobs and driving down ordinary people's wages. It's simply not fair. And for that matter, the Polish nationalists and the Greek nationalists don't want their people going to Britain. We agree completely. Because if they leave for Britain, the gaps are filled by Vietnamese, in the case of Poland, or by Kazakhs and all sorts of strange people. And in the case of Greece and in the case of Italy, they're being filled by Africans. And as nationalists, they want their young men and women to stay in their country and build a better future for their people in their own country, just like we do. So we agree with them completely, and the sooner those countries are taken over and run by proper nationalist parties for the benefit of their people, the sooner the people of this country benefit as well. So it's a win-win. People have the right to stay at home, not to be forced to come here to compete with us, to take our scarce resources because the banks and the big companies have looted their countries. And that's why nationalists, although it's at first sight strange, well, the BNP don't want Poles here. How can he work with the Poles? Because we and the Polish nationalists agree 100%. Britain for the British and Poland for the Poles. So I was very pleased. One of the people I shared a platform with in Russia was an MP from Golden Dawn. First one I've met. Very, very bright young man. Spoke really good English. Far better than my Greek, which is like zero. And I was very pleased when he gave me a letter from their leader, Nikolai Mikhailolikos, or something similar. I hope that doesn't offend him. Well, he won't see this because the poor man's in prison. He's one of the leading group, still in prison, on utterly trumped-up charges, totally undemocratic, but he took the time to arrange to send this letter to me from prison. So I'll read it to you because I only got it because you got me there as an MEP. Dear Mr. Griffin, I'm sending you my kindest regards, thanking you for your support and solidarity. It was a blessing when you spoke in the European Parliament about the illegal prosecution of a registered political party, of which it is my honour to be its leader. Undoubtedly, this was an act of great courage, because inside the European Parliament, for the first time, the vile face of the traitorous Greek government was exposed, a government which doesn't hesitate to send to prison its political rivals without a shred of evidence. We strongly believe in a Europe of the nations, and we hope that we don't have to see such incidents in the future. We hope that all the European patriotic movements will reach the European dream without having to go through the political censorship and prosecution that we're going through right now in Greece. I hope that this European completion will be based on mutual understanding and solidarity of the nations and not on debt and exploitation. Sincerely yours. And we need to be in touch with these people because all of us can learn. We need to be together because we need to learn. We can learn from the problems they're going through. As I say, when you look at what happened to the Vlaams Belang, when you look at what they try to do to Golden Dawn, it's very clear they do the same thing to us. We're here tonight to help to organise to win a seat or several seats in the European election. This party is committed to the democratic process, to taking power through the ballot box, but the ballot box alone is not enough. Because if you show you're making enough progress through the ballot box, they simply ban you. So it's not enough to be able to win through the ballot box. We need other things as well. We need economic power. We need social power. We need campaigning power. We need the ability to bring the streets of London to an absolute standstill if we're unfairly treated. We don't have that ability yet. These are the things that we have to build over not the next few months, but over the years ahead. We have to do these things. It's why we put significant effort over the years into establishing Solidarity, a nationalist trade union. The left went berserk when we founded that 8 or 9 years ago, did their very best to destroy it. Solidarity is now a success story with 500-600 members and growing steadily all the time. It's got people who constantly, they're getting new members because people are hearing, if you want a union that fights for your rights, instead of just takes your dues each month and uses it for some fat leftist political full-timer, time server, if you want that kind of union, carry on as you are. If you want a union which, if you have trouble getting your holiday pay, if you're unfairly treated by the bosses or whatever, you want a union that will fight for you, Solidarity is the one. So it's growing steadily. Yes, it's tiny relative to Unison and the other, the big corrupt far left trade unions. It's tiny, but it's embryonic, it's established, it's steady, and it's growing. It's a base from which we can build. Just the same as when we've had councillors elected, or even when we get people on parish councils. We've got more of those than we've ever had at the moment. It's great because it's the very first rung of a ladder. And at the top of the ladder is power, but you don't leap to the top of the ladder. You have to start at the bottom and work your way up. And that's what we're doing in this field. We're doing the same. A lot of power in Britain rests in the courts. We recently had a fantastic victory when Clive Jefferson and Dawn Charlton, both councillors, they didn't just get off by magic when they were accused absurdly of inciting racial hatred by pointing out that the Labour Party was employing Poles to deliver its leaflets. Poles who didn't even know they were going, hence our jibe, pay peanuts, get monkeys. But the idea that that was breaking the race laws was an attack on every single person here. Whether you're an activist or whether you just speak your mind, if that was breaking the law, then all of us break the law every single damn day. Well, it's to hope you do. If you're not, you should be ashamed of yourselves. Simple. But we won that case. We forced them to drop it. It didn't happen by accident. We put together a legal team which can take on top barristers, can take on the opposition, and can win in the courts. That's really important. There's more to be done. What we've done with campaigning, there's a lot more to be done. But here in Blackpool, more than anything else, with the 10 years struggle for a beginnings of a glimmer of justice in the Charlene Downs case. And finally, thanks to Karen, thanks to Tony Bamber, thanks to Derek and BNP TV, and doorstepping the Northwest head of the Crown Prosecution Service, we forced them to look at it, we forced them to reopen that case. It's not justice, it's a hope of justice. We need more than anything else if we're going to grow electorally, grow in economic terms, grow in cultural power, just become a real force for good in this country. More than anything else, we need to build a sense of community. We need to sink community roots. We need to work in our own places, in our own streets, amongst our own communities, so that an attack on us, like they've attacked the Flemish, like they've attacked the Greeks, an attack on the Nationalist Party becomes an attack on the whole community. That's what we have to make happen. It can't happen by accident. I can tell you about it. I can't make it happen. You've got to make it happen. And it can be done. I'll just give you one example. That tremendous meat and potato pie and so on by Brian and his wife didn't happen by accident. They made that. But when you've got thousands and thousands of people now relying on food banks and soup kitchens, we're going to need to start taking those skills and doing that not just for ourselves, for our own family, but for a broader family of people out there who need our help. That's just as political as putting out leaflets, as standing up here making a speech or whatever. It's just as political helping our own people in something like that. Not because we can, by providing perhaps a meal for 20 old age pensioners, not because one meal a fortnight makes a big difference, but because it's the psychological thing and what it tells our people that nobody else does this, no other political party even thinks about it. We do it because we are different, because we care for our people, because we are of our people. And it's that propaganda of the deed that's something, instead of talk, 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 every single politician promises people a better life. Talk, 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 talk. We've got to stop talking all the time and start acting with things like meat and potato pie. Making a meat and potato pie and giving it out to members of our community is a revolutionary act. Don't forget that. And please, some of you, ladies especially, because ladies are better at caring, they're better at organising things, start to look for ways in which that can be done in Blackpool or other towns you come from. It's something that's going to be very important. Got a copy here of the Burnley Express this week. Help us feed the hungry is the front page. Food Bank sends out 200 parcels a week. Shock figures reveal that the Food Bank based in Burnley sends out 200 food parcels, a number that's doubled since last year. Its staff have received 3,998 new referrals this year alone, resulting in deliveries to 7,012 people, 2,313 of whom were children. Then it goes on to say it's changes in the benefit system, increasing heating and power charges, spiralling bills, plunging more and more families and individuals into the food crisis category. I'll tell you one reason for it. This rotten government spending £13 billion a year on foreign aid, most of which goes down the throats of dictators, while our people go hungry in Burnley and Blackpool all over. It's an absolute disgrace. And especially down in London, we've got a team of young lads down there who are making tremendous efforts and doing a great job experimenting with food banks and so on, and putting the stuff out on stalls, offering it to passers-by. Usually, at the end of the day, they've got more food than they started with. Because even though people are poor, they're coming up, they're so touched by the fact there's a political party actually trying to do something, that they're coming up and giving 2 tins of beans instead of taking a tin of beans away. And it really is having an effect. But we've got to do more of this. It's exceptional when somewhere in a branch people make a communal meal. It's exceptional when people go out and do something like a food bank or go around helping pensioners in their ward when it snows or whatever. It happens in enough places to say it's what our party does. But it's not happening everywhere yet. And it needs to become really what all of us do time after time after time. Because I tell you this, there's a huge crisis coming the way of the people of this country. A financial crisis like no one's ever seen before. Worse, considering how well off everyone relatively are, worse than the 1930s. It's heading our way like a steam train. It's going to come. There's no question about it. I can also tell you that there's huge soft support for this party already. There's immense respect out there for the British National Party, even amongst people who've never voted for us. It's immense. When I got elected in 2009, we took, across the whole of the country, we took over 6% of the vote. In the teeth of all the hatred, all the smears, all the lies, all the iron curtain of silence against us, we took over 6% of the vote. Golden Dawn, a few years before that, took, like I said before, 0.7% of the vote. About 1/10 of what we got. So don't think, oh, 6%, where's that going? There's 10 times what Golden Dawn had. And yet, because the crisis has hit Greece first, and because they were already quite respected and known as fighters for their people, fighters for their country, when it really came down to it, people started to turn to them in huge numbers. And the same thing is going to happen to us. We've weathered the storm. We're still here. We're growing again. We're developing these new techniques. We're developing these new ways to really connect with our people. We're going to keep on rolling those out. We're going into that election next year to win. And whatever happens, when the storm breaks on this country, we will be ready and our time will come. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.